The year was 2287, and Captain Daniel Rivers stood on the bridge of his ship looking out at the stars. He had been waiting for this moment his whole life. Humanity was finally being accepted into the Galactic Council. It had taken 30 years since first contact with alien life, but now Earth was going to sit at the table with the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Lieutenant Amy. Foster walked up beside him holding a data tablet. Her face looked worried. She handed him the tablet without saying a word. Daniel read the message that had just arrived from the Council headquarters. His hand started to shake. The Galactic Council was giving humanity an ultimatum. Earth had 60 days to surrender 90% of all military weapons and ships. The orbital defense platforms had to be taken apart. The research facilities working on new weapons had to shut down forever. If humanity refused, then the Council would use force to make them comply. Daniel read the message 3 times, trying to understand it. Ambassador Vekthar from the Zerithian Empire had signed the order. The message explained that humanity was too young and too aggressive. In just 30 years, humans had been involved in 3 border conflicts with other species. Human ships had gone to places they were not supposed to go. Humans had developed weapons that made the older alien races nervous. The Council had decided that humanity needed to be controlled before they became a real threat. Back on Earth, President Helen Martinez called an emergency meeting. Deep underground in a bunker beneath the city of Geneva, the most important military and government leaders gathered around a table. Everyone was shouting at once. Admiral Kyle Thompson slammed his fist down hard, making everyone go quiet. Admiral Kyle was the commander of Earth Defense Fleet. He was a big man with gray hair and angry eyes. He said this was nothing but extortion. The aliens wanted humanity to be defenseless. They wanted to be able to control Earth and all the human colonies without any resistance. Dr. Lisa Chen spoke up next. She was a small woman who studied alien politics and cultures. She said the Council had done this before to other species. 200 years ago, a race called the Harathi had been given the same ultimatum. They had agreed to disarm, and now they were a small, unimportant civilization that nobody respected. They had survived, but only as servants to the more powerful races. Kyle said he would rather fight than become a slave. Several other military officers agreed with him. But President Martinez knew the truth. The combined military power of the Galactic Council could destroy all of Earth's defenses in less than a week. The Zerithians alone had been traveling between stars for over 5,000 years. Their technology was so advanced it seemed like magic. The Crover Dominion had warships the size of small moons. Humanity's best ships and weapons would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. The president made her decision. Humanity would comply with the ultimatum. They would disarm. There was no other choice if they wanted to survive. But not everyone in the room agreed with surrendering. Colonel Nathan Price sat quietly at the end of the table. He did not argue or shout. He just listened and watched. When the meeting ended, he left without saying anything to anyone. Nathan went to a private communication terminal and sent an encrypted message. Then he took a shuttle to Antarctica. The shuttle landed on the ice near what looked like an old research station, but that was just a disguise. The real facility was buried 3 miles under the ice. This place was called Project Sanctuary. It was a black-budget program that had been running for 15 years. Most people in the government did not even know it existed. The project had been given unlimited funding and complete secrecy. Only a few dozen people knew what was really happening in this frozen place. Nathan took an elevator down through the ice. It took 20 minutes to reach the bottom. When the doors opened, he walked into a massive underground complex that was bigger than most cities. Thousands of people worked here. Scientists and engineers and doctors and teachers, all of them working on something that would change everything. Dr. Rebecca Moore was waiting for him in the main laboratory. She was the lead scientist for Project Sanctuary. She had gray hair and tired eyes, but when she smiled, her whole face lit up. She activated a holographic display that showed something Nathan had seen many times before, but still found amazing. Rebecca called it the Resonance Network. It was not a weapon in any normal sense. There were no guns or missiles or bombs. Instead, it was based on something that made humanity completely unique in the entire galaxy. She explained it simply. Every known alien species in the galaxy had developed technology to overcome their limitations. They built computers to think for them. They built ships to carry them across space. They built weapons to protect themselves, but humans had evolved differently. The human brain had something special that no other species possessed. Humans could connect with each other at the quantum level. It was not telepathy exactly. It was more like a kind of shared consciousness that happened naturally when humans worked together. Scientists had noticed it for decades, but never understood how it worked. When humans focused together, their brainwaves synchronized. When they concentrated on the same goal, their neural patterns matched up perfectly. And when millions of humans did this at the same time, something incredible happened. They could affect reality itself. Rebecca showed Nathan the data from years of research. When human consciousness focused in specific ways, it created measurable changes in quantum fields. These changes were tiny when just one person did it. But when thousands or millions of people synchronized their minds, the effect became powerful. Powerful enough to change matter and energy at the most basic level. The Galactic Council thought they were forcing humanity to give up weapons. They thought they were making Earth weak and defenseless, but they had no idea that humanity's real power had nothing to do with ships or guns. Humans had discovered something that the ancient alien races had forgotten or never knew: the power of consciousness itself. Nathan looked at the holographic display showing connection nodes spreading across Earth and all the human colonies. Each node represented thousands of people who had been trained to use the resonance network. Teachers and farmers and artists and engineers. Normal people who had learned to do something extraordinary. Rebecca told him they were ready. 3 million humans had completed the training. They were stationed on Earth and Mars and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and in orbital habitats throughout the solar system. The Galactic Council would send observers to watch humanity dismantle its military. Those observers would see exactly what they expected to see: ships being taken apart, weapons being destroyed, defense platforms being shut down. But they would not see the real preparation happening. They would not detect the network of human minds linking together across space. They could not measure or understand the power that humanity was building. Their sensors and scanners looked for technology and energy signatures. They had no way to detect 3 million human minds learning to reshape reality through thought alone. Colonel Nathan smiled for the first time since reading the ultimatum. The Galactic Council wanted to disarm humanity. They could have their wish, but they were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon had never been made of metal or fire. It was made of something far more powerful: the unbreakable will of the human spirit and the incredible power of minds working together as one. The galaxy was about to discover what humanity was really capable of when pushed into a corner. And nothing would ever be the same again. The process of dismantling Earth's military took 3 long months. Ships that had protected humanity for decades were being broken apart in orbital shipyards. Weapons that had taken years to build were being destroyed. Defense satellites that had watched over Earth were being shut down and sent crashing into the atmosphere, where they burned up like falling stars. Commander Zeknor of the Krovar Dominion stood on an observation deck watching the humans destroy their own defenses. He was tall and covered in dark scales with eyes that glowed red in the dim light. He had been sent by the Galactic Council to make sure humanity followed every single rule of the disarmament treaty. He watched with satisfaction as another human warship was cut into pieces by salvage crews. Zeknor believed he was witnessing the end of a potential threat. Humanity would never again be able to challenge the established order of the galaxy. They would become just another minor species that followed the rules and caused no trouble. He filed his reports every day, saying that Earth was complying perfectly with all demands. Captain Daniel Rivers had been reassigned to a small patrol ship called the ESS Vigilant. It was an old vessel that barely worked anymore. The Council observers did not even bother to inspect it closely. Most of the crew members from his old ship had been discharged from service. Daniel watched his fellow officers and enlisted personnel leave the military with tears in their eyes. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, and now they were being sent home like they had done something wrong. But something strange was happening across all of human space. While the military was being taken apart, a different kind of recruitment was happening quietly in the background. Civilians were being contacted and asked to join something called the Cultural Exchange Program. The messages said it was a training program to help humans learn how to interact better with alien species. Thousands of people signed up thinking they would become diplomats or translators. Lieutenant Amy Foster received one of these messages 2 weeks after her ship was decommissioned. She had expected to go back to her family and find a normal job. Instead, she got orders to report to a facility in Antarctica. The orders were encrypted and marked with the highest security clearance. She did not tell anyone where she was going. When Amy arrived at the facility, she could not believe what she saw. The underground complex was enormous. Thousands of people were already there and more were arriving every day. She recognized some of them as former military personnel, but most were civilians. There were teachers and farmers and artists and engineers. There were old people and young people from every continent on Earth. Colonel Nathan Price met her in the main hall. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright with excitement. He told her she had been selected for something important. He said the training would be difficult and strange, but if she succeeded, she would be part of something that would save humanity. Amy and 9,000 other recruits were brought to a large auditorium. Dr. Rebecca Moore stood on a stage in front of them. She began to explain what the resonance network really was. Rebecca said that humans had always been different from other species in one crucial way. The human brain created quantum entanglements naturally. When people felt strong emotions together, like at concerts or sporting events or during disasters, their brain waves would synchronize without anyone trying to make it happen. Humans had always been able to sense each other's feelings and thoughts in ways that seemed almost magical. Parents knew when their children were in danger even from far away. Twins could feel each other's pain. Soldiers in combat units would act together without speaking as if they shared one mind. But nobody had understood that this was a real measurable quantum effect until 15 years ago. Scientists at Project Sanctuary had discovered that when human minds synchronized, they created changes in the quantum field. These changes were small when just a few people were involved. But when millions of minds worked together, the effect became powerful enough to alter reality itself. The training began the next day. Amy sat in a small room with 20 other people. An instructor told them to close their eyes and focus on their breathing. It seemed simple, but it was harder than anything Amy had ever done. Her mind kept wandering. She kept thinking about her old ship and her friends who had been forced to leave the service. The instructor was patient. She said it would take time to learn. The key was to stop thinking of yourself as separate from everyone else. Humans had built societies and cultures that emphasized individual achievement and personal identity. But at the quantum level, there was no real separation between one human mind and another. Every human consciousness was connected to every other through invisible threads of quantum entanglement. Days turned into weeks. Amy slowly learned how to quiet her own thoughts and feel the presence of other minds around her. At first, it was just a vague sensation like knowing someone was standing behind you without looking, but gradually it became stronger and clearer. She could sense the emotions of the other people in her training group. She could feel when someone was happy or sad or frustrated. Then they taught her how to synchronize. 20 people in the room would all focus on the same thought at the same time. When they did it correctly, Amy could feel something shift. It was like 20 separate voices singing the same note and creating a harmony that was more beautiful than any single voice could make alone. The feeling was overwhelming and wonderful. After 3 months of training, Amy's group was ready for the first real test. They were taken to a laboratory where a small object sat on a table. It was just a metal cube about the size of a fist. The instructor told them to focus on the cube together. All 20 minds had to visualize the same thing at the same time. They had to imagine the cube changing color from silver to gold. Amy closed her eyes and reached out with her mind to connect with the others. She felt them one by one like instruments joining an orchestra. When all 20 minds were synchronized, they focused together on the cube. They visualized it changing. They believed it would change. They knew it would change. When Amy opened her eyes, the cube was gold. Not painted or coated, but changed at the molecular level. The atoms had been rearranged by the focused power of 20 human minds working as one. Some people in the room started crying. Others laughed with joy and disbelief. They had just done something that should have been impossible. They had changed matter using only their thoughts. And this was just 20 people. Across human space, 3 million people were learning to do the same thing. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council observers continued filing their reports. Commander Zeknor watched another defense station get dismantled. He saw human soldiers turning in their weapons. He believed humanity was being successfully neutered. The dangerous young species was being brought under control. Zeknor had no idea that in hidden facilities across Earth and its colonies, millions of humans were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. They were becoming nodes in a network of consciousness that could reshape reality itself. They were not building weapons out of metal and energy. They were turning themselves into something far more powerful. President Martinez visited the sanctuary facility in the final week of the disarmament process. She watched thousands of people practicing their synchronization exercises. She saw demonstrations of small objects being moved and changed by focused thought. Dr. Rebecca showed her projections of what would be possible when all 3 million trained people linked together at once. The president asked if it would really work in a real crisis. Nathan told her they would find out soon enough. He had received intelligence that someone was planning to test humanity's defenses. A group called the Vorsak Syndicate had been watching the disarmament with great interest. They were pirates and raiders who survived by attacking weak targets. And now Earth looked very weak indeed. Nathan said the Syndicate would attack within months. When they did, humanity would show the galaxy what real power looked like. Not the power to destroy with weapons, but the power to protect through consciousness itself. The galaxy had forced humanity to give up guns and bombs and missiles. They were about to learn that humanity had never needed those things in the first place. The disarmament was complete. Earth had complied with every demand. The Galactic Council declared the matter closed. Humanity was no longer a military threat. The dangerous young species had been tamed, but they were wrong. Humanity had not been tamed. Humanity had been awakened, and the galaxy was about to discover what that really meant. 6 months after Earth finished disarming, a new threat appeared from the outer edges of the galaxy. The Vorsak Syndicate was not a government or a civilization. It was a collection of pirate clans and mercenary groups that made their living by raiding and stealing from weaker species. They had bases hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems where no one could find them. Warlord Kravik was the leader of the largest syndicate fleet. He was a massive creature with 4 arms and armor-plated skin. He had been watching the news about humanity's forced disarmament with great interest. He called a meeting of all his fleet commanders in his flagship. Kravik told them that the Galactic Council had given them a gift. The humans were now defenseless. Their warships had been destroyed. Their weapons had been taken away. Their orbital defenses were gone. The human colonies were full of valuable resources, and the people had no way to protect themselves. The Council's own laws meant they could not keep permanent military forces in member systems. It would take weeks for the Council to send help if anyone attacked human space. The Syndicate fleet would strike fast and hard. They would hit the major colonies and take everything valuable. Food, metals, technology, even people to sell as slaves. Then they would disappear back into the outer rim before the Council could respond. It was perfect. Kravik assembled 800 warships. It was the largest fleet the Syndicate had ever gathered. They set course for human space, traveling faster than light. Their first target was a colony world called New Seattle. It was an agricultural planet that grew food for a dozen other human settlements. The planet had almost no defenses left after the disarmament. It would be easy prey. Lieutenant Amy Foster was on New Seattle when the Syndicate arrived. She had been stationed there as part of a resonance node. She lived in a small apartment in the main colony city and worked at what looked like a normal office building. But beneath the building was a meditation chamber connected to the resonance network. Amy was eating breakfast when the alarm started blaring. She looked up at the sky and saw ships appearing out of nowhere. Hundreds of them. They were dark and ugly vessels covered in weapons. The few remaining orbital defense platforms started firing, but they were destroyed within minutes. The Syndicate warships began bombarding the planet's surface. Amy did not panic. She had been trained for this moment. She ran to the office building and took the elevator down to the underground chamber. Other members of her node were already arriving. They sat in comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. There were 50 people in this particular node. Across human space, 3 million others were doing exactly the same thing. Amy closed her eyes and began the breathing exercises she had practiced thousands of times. She felt her mind expanding beyond her body. She sensed the presence of the other 49 people in the room with her. Their minds touched hers gently like old friends saying hello. Then she reached further. The resonance network activated instantly. 3 million human minds connected across light years of space in less than a second. Amy felt her consciousness merge with an ocean of awareness so vast it was almost frightening. She was still herself, but she was also part of something infinitely larger. She was one voice in a choir of millions singing the same song. On the surface of New Seattle, The Syndicate soldiers were landing their troop carriers. They wore heavy battle armor and carried powerful weapons. They had orders to secure the main settlements and begin loading supplies onto transport ships. This was supposed to be easy. The humans had no military left. There would be no real resistance. The first squad of Syndicate soldiers approached a farming community on the outskirts of the main city. They raised their weapons ready to fire warning shots to scare the humans into compliance. But when they pulled the triggers, nothing happened. The weapons did not fire. The soldiers looked at their guns in confusion. They checked the power cells and the ammunition feeds. Everything looked normal, but the weapons simply would not work. Then things got stranger. The soldiers' armor started locking up. The powered joints that let them move froze in place. Some soldiers fell over, unable to keep their balance. Others stood trapped inside their own armor like statues. They tried to use their communication systems to call for help, but the radios produced only silence. But the worst part was what they felt in their minds. Emotions that were not their own began flooding into their consciousness. They felt determination and hope and fierce protective love. They felt what it meant to be human. They saw through human eyes and experienced human memories. They felt the weight of Earth's long history of struggle and survival. They understood what it meant to be part of a species that refused to give up, no matter how bad things got. The Syndicate soldiers had killed and raided for years without feeling guilt. But now they felt everything their victims had felt, the fear and pain and loss. It was overwhelming. Some of them started crying inside their helmets. Others fell to their knees begging for forgiveness even though no one was attacking them. In orbit around New Seattle, the Syndicate warships were experiencing their own problems. The ships were controlled by advanced computer systems. Those systems were suddenly rewriting themselves. Not because of any virus or hacking attempt, but because reality itself was being changed at the quantum level. The resonance network was reaching into the fundamental structure of matter and energy and rearranging it. Warships that had weapons found those weapons had never existed. The atoms had been reorganized into harmless materials. Engines that had been working perfectly suddenly had no fuel to burn. The fuel had been converted into inert gases. Ships that had been ready for battle became useless hunks of metal floating in space. Aboard the Syndicate flagship Warlord, Kravik watched his fleet falling apart. Ship after ship reported total system failures. Weapons offline. Engines dead. Life support failing. He screamed orders at his crew, but nothing helped. His own ship's systems were shutting down one by one. Kravik demanded to know what was happening. His technicians had no answers. Their instruments showed no signs of attack. No energy weapons were being fired. No missiles had been launched. No electromagnetic pulses had been detonated. The ships were just failing as if the universe had decided they should not work anymore. The truth was exactly that. 3 million human minds working together had reached into the quantum foam of reality and rewritten the rules. The Syndicate's technology relied on certain physical laws working in certain ways. The resonance network had temporarily changed those laws in the space around New Seattle. Matter and energy no longer behaved the way the Syndicate expected. Colonel Nathan Price watched the battle from the sanctuary facility on Earth. The word battle was not really accurate because no shots were being fired. The Syndicate fleet was simply being neutralized. Displays showed hundreds of enemy ships going dark. Thousands of enemy soldiers standing motionless on the planet's surface, unable to fight or even move. Nathan reported to President Martinez that the Syndicate was in full retreat. The ships that could still maneuver were running away as fast as possible. They were abandoning the soldiers on the ground. 400 vessels had been lost to complete system failure. The rest were fleeing back toward the outer rim, spreading stories of the impossible thing they had witnessed. Amy Foster opened her eyes in the meditation chamber beneath New Seattle. She felt exhausted, like she had run a marathon. Around her, the other members of her node were slowly waking up. Some were crying. Others were laughing with relief. They had been part of something incredible. They had defended their world without firing a single shot. The battle for New Seattle had lasted less than 4 hours. When it was over, not a single human had been killed. The Syndicate soldiers who had been trapped in their armor were released once the network reduced its focus. Most of them surrendered immediately. A few tried to run, but they were easily captured by local security forces. News of the defense spread slowly across the galaxy, traveling at the speed of light. But when it reached the Galactic Council, the reaction was immediate and intense. What humanity had done should have been impossible. The elder races had studied quantum mechanics for thousands of years. They had never discovered anything like the resonance network. Ambassador Vector of the Zerithian Empire sent an urgent message requesting a meeting with President Martinez. For the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, the ancient alien sounded afraid. He asked a simple question that would change everything. What had humanity become? President Martinez smiled when she read the message. She composed a careful reply. Humanity had defended itself without weapons and without violence exactly as the Council had required. Earth had followed every rule of the disarmament treaty. But the Council had made a mistake. They had assumed that weapons were the only form of power that mattered. Humanity had discovered something far more fundamental. The power of consciousness itself. The ability to reach into reality at its deepest level and change it through focused will and unified purpose. It was not technology. It was not violence. It was something the galaxy had forgotten or never knew existed. The Council had tried to disarm humanity. Instead, they had forced humans to discover their true strength. And now the galaxy would have to accept that humanity was not weak or defense. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session for the first time in 3 centuries. All 9 elder races gathered in person on the neutral world of Concordia. The massive chamber was built to hold thousands of beings from different species. The air was filtered and adjusted so that everyone could breathe comfortably. Translation devices allowed all the different languages to be understood by everyone present. The council members were afraid and angry. The Zerithians, with their tall, graceful bodies and silver skin, sat in their designated section looking worried. The Krovar Dominion representatives were massive scaled warriors who kept their hands near their weapons. The Polarian Collective sent crystalline beings that glowed with internal light. The Thousand Streams Confederation arrived as a group of fluid creatures that communicated through color changes. All of them were talking about the same thing: what to do about humanity. Ambassador Vector stood at the central podium. He had lived for over 400 years and had seen many strange things in his long life. But nothing had prepared him for what humanity had done. He spoke in a grave voice that echoed through the chamber. The quantum realm was not meant to be manipulated by biological consciousness. It was a fundamental rule of the universe. Organic minds could observe quantum effects, but they could not control them deliberately. That was why all species had developed technology to interact with the quantum level. Computers and machines could do what living brains could not. But humanity had broken that rule. They had found a way to directly manipulate reality at the quantum level, using only their minds. This was not just dangerous. It was revolutionary. If humans could do it, then everything the elder races understood about the universe might be wrong. A Krovar general stood up and demanded action. His voice was a deep growl that made the floor vibrate. He said humanity must be stopped. They had developed a power that made them a threat to every other species in the galaxy. The Council should use military force to shut down this resonance network before humans became too powerful to control. But a Polarian scientist spoke against violence. Its crystalline form shimmered as it communicated through translated light pulses. The Polarian explained that attacking humanity would be pointless. If humans could manipulate reality itself, then conventional weapons would be useless. The Syndicate's defeat had proven that. 800 warships had been neutralized without a single shot being fired by human forces. The debate raged for hours. Some wanted to quarantine human space and forbid any contact with other species. Others suggested offering humanity a partnership if they agreed to strict limits on using their power. A few of the more paranoid species proposed trying to destroy Earth completely before humans became unstoppable. Then President Helen Martinez arrived with her delegation. She walked into the council chamber accompanied by Dr. Rebecca Moore and Colonel Nathan Price. Every alien eye turned to watch them enter. Some looks were hostile, some were fearful. A few showed curiosity. Martinez was not intimidated. She had been a soldier before becoming a politician. She had fought in the border wars that had made the council nervous about humanity in the first place. She knew how to stand her ground. Ambassador Vector addressed her directly. He demanded to know how humanity had achieved the impossible. He accused humans of violating the fundamental laws of nature. He said the resonance network was an abomination that should not exist. Dr. Rebecca Moore stepped forward to respond. She was not a diplomat or a soldier. She was a scientist who had dedicated 15 years of her life to understanding what made humanity special. She spoke calmly and clearly. Rebecca explained that the quantum realm had always responded to observation and consciousness. Scientists had known this for centuries. The act of observing a quantum particle affected its behavior. What humanity had discovered was how to make that observation focused and deliberate and powerful through collective effort. Every species in the galaxy had developed along similar paths. They built artificial intelligence to handle complex calculations. They created faster-than-light communication devices to stay connected across vast distances. They designed hive-mind interfaces to allow multiple individuals to share information. All of this was technology designed to overcome the natural limitations of biological minds. But humans had evolved differently. The human brain had unusual quantum entanglement at the neural level. Humans naturally synchronized with each other in ways that other species did not. When humans felt strong emotions together, their minds would link without any technology needed. This was why human cultures emphasized community and connection so strongly. It was built into their biology. Project Sanctuary had simply learned how to amplify and direct what was already there. The resonance network was not artificial. It was natural human ability enhanced through training and practice. A Krovar general interrupted angrily. He said this proved humans were too dangerous. If they could manipulate reality, then they could destroy entire civilizations. They could rewrite the laws of physics. They could unmake the galaxy itself. President Martinez answered this time. She said the general was correct that humans had great power, but power was not the same as intent. Humanity did not want to conquer or destroy. Humans wanted what they had always wanted, to survive and grow and be treated with respect. Then Colonel Nathan gave a signal. Across human space, the resonance network activated. But this time, instead of defending against attack, it reached out gently to touch the minds of every being in the council chamber. The experience was profound and overwhelming. The alien delegates suddenly felt what it meant to be human, not through words or explanations, but through direct experience. They felt humanity's long struggle to survive on a world that was often hostile. They felt the loneliness of being the only intelligent species on their planet, with no one to teach them or guide them. They felt the determination that had driven humans to reach for the stars despite every obstacle and setback. They felt human emotions. Love for family and friends. Hope for a better future. Fear of being destroyed or enslaved. Pride in accomplishments earned through hard work. The desire to be accepted as equals by the older civilizations of the galaxy. And they felt something deeper. They felt the human belief that different beings could work together despite their differences, that conflicts could be resolved through understanding rather than violence, that the universe was big enough for everyone to find their place. When the connection faded, the council chamber was completely silent. Some of the aliens were crying in whatever way their biology allowed. Others sat in stunned contemplation. The crystalline Polarians were glowing brighter than before, pulsing with colors that indicated deep emotional response. Ambassador Vekthar spoke in a quiet voice. He said that in his 400 years of life he had encountered dozens of species and seen wonders beyond counting. But he had never experienced anything like what had just happened. Humans possessed something unique and precious, something that might be the most important discovery in galactic history. But he also understood now why humans were so insistent on being treated as equals. They were not just another minor species to be controlled and managed. They were something genuinely new. A species that had found a different path to power. One based not on technology but on consciousness itself. The Krovar general who had demanded military action sat with his head bowed. He admitted that he had been wrong. Any attempt to attack humanity would fail. The resonance network could neutralize any conventional military force. But more than that, the general said he no longer wanted to attack. After experiencing what it meant to be human, he understood that they were not enemies. The debate continued, but the tone had changed completely. Instead of arguing about how to contain humanity, the council members discussed how to accommodate them. New proposals were made. Humanity would be recognized as a full member of the council with equal voting rights. The disarmament mandate would be lifted immediately. Humans would be allowed to rebuild whatever defenses they wanted. In exchange, humanity agreed to certain restrictions. The resonance network would only be used for defense, not aggression. Humans would share their knowledge of quantum consciousness manipulation with other species. And most importantly, humanity would help the Council understand this new frontier of science that they had opened. President Martinez accepted the terms. She knew that some species might learn to use similar techniques. Dr. Rebecca had already explained that the human brain was uniquely suited for this kind of consciousness work. Other species might develop their own versions, but they would be different. Each race would find their own path. The meeting ended with something unprecedented. Ambassador Vekthar approached Martinez personally and performed a Zerithian gesture of deep respect. He said that humanity had taught the galaxy a valuable lesson. Power came in many forms. The elder races had been so focused on technology that they had forgotten to look inward at the potential of consciousness itself. As the human delegation left the council chamber, they knew that everything had changed. Earth was no longer a junior member begging for acceptance. Humanity was now recognized as a major power in the galaxy, a species that had discovered something revolutionary. But far out in the dark spaces beyond the galactic rim, 3 years passed after humanity's recognition by the Galactic Council. The Resonance Network had grown to over 10 million trained members. Humans were using their unique ability for more than just defense. Scientists used the network to speed up research by sharing ideas directly between minds. Engineers synchronized their consciousness to solve complex problems that would have taken years to figure out alone. Terraforming crews used the resonance to reshape entire planets more efficiently than any machine could. Admiral Daniel Rivers now commanded the ESS Unity, which was the most advanced ship in the human fleet. The vessel combined normal technology with systems enhanced by the Resonance Network. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster served as his second officer and was one of the best resonance coordinators in human space. Life seemed good. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy. But in the deep darkness beyond the rim of the galaxy, something ancient was moving. The Voidborn had existed for longer than most stars. They were beings of pure energy and consciousness that had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago before biological life had evolved. When organic species began spreading across the stars, the Voidborn had retreated to the space between galaxies. They had gone into a deep sleep waiting for the biological civilizations to destroy themselves, as the Voidborn believed they eventually would. Humanity's discovery of quantum consciousness manipulation had awakened them. The Voidborn felt it like a scream across dimensions. Biological life had learned to do what only the Voidborn had been able to do. Organic minds were touching the fundamental fabric of reality. This was not supposed to be possible. The Voidborn decided they needed to eliminate this threat before it grew stronger. The first sign of their return came from a deep space monitoring station at the edge of human territory. A young technician named Gary Phillips was on duty watching his instruments when he noticed something wrong. The quantum field readings were going wild. Space itself was rippling like water when a stone is thrown into a pond. Gary called his commander, Linda Hayes, to look at the readings. She had never seen anything like it. Before they could figure out what was happening, the Voidborn arrived. They did not come in ships. They came as tears in reality itself, wounds in space-time that bled pure energy. When the Voidborn touched the monitoring station, it simply stopped existing. The entire structure with all its crew and equipment vanished as if it had never been there. Atoms were scattered across multiple dimensions. Gary only survived because he was part of a resonance training group and had been meditating when the attack happened. His consciousness was linked to the network, so when his body died, his mind fled into the collective awareness of humanity. 3 days later, Gary woke up in a cloned body grown from his genetic material. The process of consciousness transfer was still experimental, but it had worked. He remembered everything about the attack. He told President Martinez and the Emergency Council what he had seen. The Voidborn were not alive in any normal sense. They existed as pure consciousness spread across multiple dimensions. They could see and move through realities that humans could barely imagine. Conventional weapons would be completely useless against them. Energy beams would pass through the Voidborn without touching them. Missiles would explode harmlessly against barriers that existed in dimensions humans could not perceive. The attacks escalated quickly. Entire colonies disappeared overnight. Ships traveling between stars vanished without sending distress calls. The Voidborn were moving through human space, destroying everything they touched. And every attack was moving closer to Earth itself. The Galactic Council was terrified. The elder races had legends about the Voidborn. Ancient stories told of beings of light that had ruled the cosmos before time itself began. But the Council had thought these were just myths. Now those myths were tearing through civilized space and nothing could stop them. Dr. Rebecca Moore studied the attack patterns and made a disturbing discovery. The Voidborn were specifically targeting human space. Every attack was moving toward locations where resonance network nodes were active. They were coming for humanity because humans had learned to manipulate consciousness and reality. The Voidborn saw this as a threat that needed to be destroyed. Admiral Daniel Rivers proposed a desperate plan during an emergency meeting. Conventional weapons would not work against the Voidborn. But what if humanity used the resonance network not as a shield but as a weapon? What if they tried to fight the Voidborn on their own level using consciousness against consciousness? Dr. Rebecca said it had never been tested. Using the network to attack beings that existed across multiple dimensions could destroy the minds of everyone connected. The human volunteers might die or go insane, but if they did nothing, the Voidborn would destroy humanity anyway. President Martinez made the decision. They would try. Every member of the Resonance Network would participate. 10 million human minds would synchronize and focus on a single goal: push the Voidborn back beyond the edge of reality itself. Amy Foster sat in her meditation chamber aboard the Unity, as the ship moved toward the center of Voidborn space. Around her in chambers across the galaxy, 10 million other humans did the same. They closed their eyes and reached out with their consciousness. They found each other one by one, creating a web of awareness that spanned the stars. Then they pushed deeper than they had ever gone before. They extended their collective consciousness past the normal 3 dimensions of space. They reached into the quantum foam and beyond, into the higher dimensions where the Voidborn existed. What they found there was beautiful and terrible. The Voidborn were ancient beyond imagining. They had no physical form at all, existing only as patterns of consciousness, woven into the fabric of space-time itself. They were powerful and wise and completely alien. But as humanity touched their minds, the humans saw something unexpected. The Voidborn were afraid. Long ago, the Voidborn had been biological creatures like humanity. They had evolved on worlds and built civilizations and reached for the stars, but they had transcended physical form, becoming beings of pure energy. In doing so, they had gained immortality and incredible power. But they had lost something important. They had lost the ability to grow and change. They could not die and be reborn. They were frozen in their existence, unable to truly evolve anymore. Now they saw humanity doing what they had done, taking the first steps toward transcendence. But humans were doing it differently. Humans kept their biological bodies while expanding their consciousness. Humans were finding a balance between matter and energy that the Voidborn had never achieved. The Voidborn attacked not because they were evil, but because they were desperate and afraid. They wanted to remain unique. They could not accept that a younger species might find a better path to transcendence than they had. Through the resonance network, Amy and the others showed the Voidborn a different possibility. They showed the ancient beings what they had become over millions of years: beautiful but lonely, powerful but without purpose, immortal but ultimately trapped in an existence that never changed, and humanity made an offer. Come back to the physical universe. Remember what it means to have form. Experience growth and change again. Be part of a community instead of isolated in higher dimensions forever. The struggle raged across realities that human eyes could not see. 10 million minds fought against the vast power of the Voidborn. It was not a battle of weapons, but a battle of ideas and visions. Each side trying to convince the other that their path was correct. Hours passed that felt like years to those connected to the network. The strain was enormous. Thousands of humans died as their minds burned out from the intensity. Others would need months to recover. But slowly the tide turned. The diversity of humanity made the difference. The Voidborn were all the same. They thought alike and existed in the same way. But every human mind was unique. Each person contributed something different to the network. That diversity created harmonies and patterns that the Voidborn could not match or resist. Some of the Voidborn began to change. The youngest ones accepted humanity's offer. They started the long process of returning to physical form, condensing their energy back into matter, being reborn as biological creatures in the normal universe. Others retreated back beyond the galactic rim. They returned to the void between galaxies where they had slept for so long. But even these ancient beings left with something new. Hope that their eternal existence might not be meaningless after all. When Amy opened her eyes, she was shaking with exhaustion. Around her, the other network members were waking from the same experience. They had won, but the cost had been high. Thousands had died. Many more would take years to fully recover. But humanity had faced beings far older and more powerful than themselves and had prevailed. 5 years later, Admiral Daniel stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the construction of a new kind of colony. Voidborn, who had chosen physical form, were working alongside humans. They were learning what it meant to live again, to eat and sleep and feel physical sensations, to be part of a community instead of existing alone in higher dimensions. Amy asked Daniel if they had done the right thing. He said they had done the human thing. They had seen beings in pain and offered help. They had faced enemies and turned them into friends. That was what